Hello, everyone. Hello, and welcome to Sausalito Books by the Bay's virtual happy hour event series. I'm Cheryl Pop, and I want to thank you all for joining us this evening, joining us virtually. I do wish we could all be together live and in person, hopefully soon. I hope you all have your happy hour glass of wine, cocktail, or any other adult beverage in hand for our virtual happy hour event series. We have a very exciting program for you this evening, for amazing women, all of whom are intrepid nomads and travel writers. And yes, I am recording. I wanted to make sure. Sorry. They're going to be sharing many journeys with you this evening, including those in the book we're going to be discussing, The Best Women's Travel Writing. It's a series of books put out by travelers, and it's like taking you on, I think it's 34 or 38 journeys to different countries, to different experiences. It's been hard for all of us to travel this last year, but you can just pick up this book and go everywhere you want. It was edited by Lavinia Spaulding, who's with us this evening, and it's featuring stories by Erin, as well as Diane and Tania, who are the other three authors you'll be meeting later this evening. Before I introduce the inimitable Erin Byrne, who is going to be the ringmaster for the evening, I want to encourage you all to submit questions into the Q&A box, which is at the bottom of your screen. And we will be doing Q&A at the end of their presentation. So submit questions. And also at the end, I'll remind everyone of this as we get to that part in the program, but you can hit the raise your hand feature at the bottom of your screen as well. And we can actually get you live and we can see a picture of you if you'd like. But I know a lot of people are happy just being in their jammies with their glass of wine. So anyway, I'm very excited to welcome this wonderful forum of travel writers that we have with us this evening. And I think a lot of you know Erin Byrne. She is the award-winning author of, first this one, Wings, Gifts of Art, Life and Travel in France, as well as vignettes and postcards from Paris, as well as vignettes and postcards from Morocco. We have all these books in our store, by the way. She wrote the screenplay for The Storykeeper and also teaches writing. She's taught at Shakespeare and Company in Paris, Book Passage here in the Bay Area, and on her deep travel trips that she does. She's a very popular host of the Lit Wings event series, featuring writers, photographers, and filmmakers, several of which we've actually hosted at Sausalito Books by the Bay. And when her essay, Our Ravaged Lady, which is featured in this volume of The Best Women's Travel Writing, was first published, it actually won the 2020 Grand Prize Solace Award for Travel Story of the Year. So we're really delighted to have Erin sort of hosting this event this evening with her fellow colleagues, writers, and intrepid travelers. So I am going to pass the baton to you now, Erin. Enjoy.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Cheryl. It's so good to see everybody in their jammies with their cocktails. So happy hour. I wanted to mention that the 2021 Grand Prize Solace Award went to Marcia de Sanctis for her story in this book, Headlights. So that alone is reason to buy the book. I'm so happy to be here with three really gifted writers who are also dear friends of mine. Lavinia Spaulding is our kick-ass editor, and she's going to introduce the book. And then later on, I'm going to interview her. Diane LeBow has a new book coming out this summer. It's called Dancing on the Wine Dark Sea. I can't seem to say that enough. I love the title. Her story that she's going to read, there it is. Her story that she's going to read in the book is kind of characteristically savvy, characteristically Diane. And Tania Romanov Amochaev was one of my Lit Wings photographers we did the event at your bookstore, Cheryl. So I'm so excited that now everyone gets a chance to hear her read because she's just a fabulous writer. So we're getting close to being able to travel, but as we wait for it, the best women's travel writing really does transport us. It's published by Traveler's Tales, and every essay is deep, meaningful, and it offers gems of insight. I felt like this particular volume was oddly prescient in this really strange time. And Lavinia can talk about that later, but it was kind of a way of making our big wide earth seem a little smaller. Lavinia Spaulding is also the editor or the author of Writing Away, and she's the co-author of With a Measure of Grace and this. I just gave my daughter-in-law With a Measure of Grace, which is a big, gorgeous cookbook, and this Immeasurable Place is I just took it out of my kitchen, and she's also the co-author of that. Her work appears in such publications as Afar, Tin House, Long Reads, Yoga Journal, Sunset, Ms., the list goes on, the San Francisco Chronicle, and the Guardian, and has been widely anthologized. Her work has won Gold, Lowell Thomas, and Solis Awards. I think the most recent story that she did that won both of those awards is called Playing by Heart, and it was originally published in Afar, and it's just a beautiful story about women flamenco guitarists in Spain. So I would urge you to find that, and I think I just saw, Lavinia, today that there's a recording of you reading it on the Afar website. Lavinia has been recognized by the Best American Travel Writing, and she lives with her family in New Orleans and on Cape Cod. Lavinia.
Thank you, Erin. Thank you so much, Cheryl, for having us. It's really so wonderful to try to imagine that I'm in Sausalito tonight, because it's one of my favorite places in the world, and I have some incredible memories there. I had my baby moon there when I was pregnant at Erin's house.
At my house, yeah.
and fell deeply in love with Sausalito. And so I'm really pleased to be here tonight. And thanks to everyone for joining us. And thanks to Erin for hosting, and Diane and Tania for coming. So, so The Best Women's Travel Writing, Volume 12. So I have edited half of them. I've edited 6. And before me, there were a couple of other editors who did a wonderful job. You should get them all. And this was a funny year because no one could travel when the book came out. And so, and because I was editing it during lockdown. So, and there was just a lot going on in the world and in our country. And as Erin said, it was, I think that the book reflects a lot of what was going on, but I had 1,300 essays to read through this year. It was the most essays I've ever had by about 700. I usually get like 400, 600, something like that. And so it was really a daunting task. And I chose 34, and it was really just a lovely experience to be on quarantine and working with these stories from all over the world. Some are deeply, deeply personal, and others are more, informative, I guess you could say, but they all really take you on a journey. I mean, there's a story, that takes us to Jordan with Susan Orlean. There's one that takes us to a country that I always mispronounce. Azerbaijan? How do you pronounce this country?
It's Azerbaijan?
I think that's it, yeah. Which is the greatest thing about being the editor of
Actually, Azerbaijan.
Thank you, Tanya. I knew one of you would know. The best thing about this anthology, about editing it, is that I always learn so much myself while I'm learning it. I had never actually heard of this country before. There are stories from France and stories from Greece. There's just, it takes us all over the world. Tanzania. Anyway, and they're all my favorite. So every story in this anthology, and it's really an honor to be here and to be hearing 3 of my favorite stories. Erin, is there anything else you want me to say about the book?
No, because
before-
we'll talk about it after.
Okay.
We'll cover it later. Yeah.
So Erin's going to kick off the reading by reading her story, or from her story, which was originally published in Hidden Compass.
Yes.
And won the grand prize. Right. The Grand Solace Prize, and is beautiful.
Thank you, Lavinia.
Absolutely.
Okay, well, April 15th, 1 week from today, marks 2 years since the fire in Notre Dame de Paris. I wrote this story in 2019, and there's a word in it that I did not know the meaning of then, that we all know now all too well. Our lives have been utterly transformed, but very little has changed for her. Our ravaged lady. She lived many lives, and here was the burnt offering of another. Notre Dame's lace spire sizzled, crumbled, and fell, and the gigantic hole it created became a cauldron. Flames, golden to orange to red, assaulted Paris's lavender sky, and smoke billowed in gray explosions. Silhouetted against glowing cinders, her bell towers stood dignified but unprotected. Firefighters wrestled with the blaze as heat and smoke rendered the crackling forest of ceiling beams unreachable. The hollow, meandering roar of the conflagration was punctuated by the thunder of falling wood and stone and the screeching of twisting iron. Victor Hugo's vast symphony of stone had Stravinsky'd. As she burned, my gut echoed the sentiment. Over the past few years, my own life had caught fire, and I'd come to Paris to escape. I'd gone through a divorce after a 32-year marriage. A long separation had fooled me into feeling prepared, but sorrow tore through me. I'd ushered my 2 sons into the world of adulthood, a letting go reminiscent of their first day of kindergarten, when I'd held them tightly, buried my face in their hair, and inhaled sweet little boy scents. I'd placed cherished items from my old life in Washington around my new California house in Sausalito, pining for the home I'd left behind. My funny, beloved father, who'd taken me sailing, taught me to worship jazz, and always called my name out with gusto, had died, which hurt in a place that seemed unreachable. I'd also endured 4 concussions, suffered a stroke, and had a heart recorder inserted surgically. At times, my brain was toast and my head exploded with migraines. I forgot appointments, struggled to find words, and mixed up numbers. Writing was impossible. My energy plummeted. Depression and anxiety crumbled my equilibrium. It would take time, the doctor said, to recover. The night of Notre Dame's fire, I was in the midst of the most recent concussion from a car accident weeks before. The glow was bright, and the cries of onlookers echoed as the crowd edged ever closer to my claustrophobic brain. The next day, Emmanuel Macron said, "Notre Dame is our history. It's our imagery. It's our literature. It's the place we live our greatest moments, from wars to pandemics to liberations." Notre Dame's lies have been tumultuous. She took 200 years to complete, then received her bell towers and rose windows, glittering eyes from which her spirit shone forth. Protestants spent centuries attacking her facade, hacking the heads off her statues. Louis XIV had Our Lady's eyes ripped out and replaced with white glass. Revolutionaries melted down her bells to make cannons and renamed her the Temple of Reason. After the fire, it was discovered that iron scaffolding on the spire's exterior had welded together, increasing the chance of collapse. Her bell towers had been 15 minutes from crumbling, but the water that saved her towers had seeped into the mortar between her stones. Moving just one, even to rescue her from ruin, might have caused her to cave in. Nothing could be moved because all had not yet settled. I was in a similar state. In 1830, when Victor Hugo created that character so intertwined with the cathedral that he was its soul, the place was a wreck. The city renovated, but Quasimodo had to wait 25 years for his new home. World War I's bombs and shrapnel punctured Notre Dame. During World War II, Our Lady's eyes were removed again, and she endured 4 long years of blind silence, her bells mute. During the liberation, Charles de Gaulle approached the cathedral as bullets from German snipers zinged from all sides and people scampered for shelter. His tall frame never flinched as he walked into Notre Dame to a blizzard of fire from the rafters. He remained for a 15-minute celebration. Our Lady of Paris had been waiting a long time for this, and her bells rang out. Louis XIV considered it his divine right never to suffer a delay, but Parisians have learned through revolutions, wars, reigns, and riots, in queues and metro stations, in bistros and museums, that most of us have to wait. In the days after the fire, crowds pondered the gaping hole in the center of her flying buttresses, her singed but intact rose windows, like eyes with smudged mascara. Parisians contemplated Notre Dame, dreaming of her next life. Attendre is French for to wait. It also means to expect. Perhaps the French take the long view. The past is prologue. To honor the old and envision the new are the same. To wait is to anticipate. That summer, the cathedral sanctuary was open to the elements and remained a jumble of accumulated debris. Charred wood like pickup sticks and stone chunks lay on the floor in pinpoint rays of sunlight, on shredded cane chairs, among piles of ashes. Notre Dame was still a triage site. Back in California, my condition worsened. Neurological testing revealed a chasm in memory, in word retrieval, in vision. The latest concussion had sparked the cumulative effects of the others and the stroke. My brain remained in chaotic clutter, and the heart recorder would likely take ages to provide answers. After the divorce, I did not see a way forward. I missed my dad. I couldn't write, so wrote random scenes in longhand, hoping they'd fit into the book later. I often woke up with an iron band of fear sinking into my chest. My brain was not strong enough to be my center, and this caused a terrifying void. What was left in there? Soon after, my family scattered my dad's ashes into Puget Sound. As they floated and swirled, then sank into the murkiness, we spoke of his humor, the jazz he played on the piano and drums, and his fiercely loyal love. All that abides now that his remains are gone. By fall, I could think and function. The scenes I'd imagined fit into my novel. The relics of my previous life, a Greek vase, a Swedish plate, photos of my sons, sat on my mantle. Like Quasimodo, I'd have had to wait, but my California home had become the place where I lived my greatest moments, my wars, my pandemics, my liberations. Our Lady persisted on pause, bound within her iron cage. That first Christmas came and went with no mass, no real movement, no restoration of her sanctuary. But inside the cathedral, among the detritus and dust, stood the altar with its glass, and next to that, the marble Pietà, where Notre Dame's namesake holds her departed with love. The center of the center remained, and the rest was reimagined. Parisian Magazine wrote, "The catastrophe refers to our humility and our helplessness. It is during those times when I'm aware of both that what endures becomes clear. I remember those violent flames licking the sky, and when my life is suspended, I try to emulate Hugo's belief in Quasimodo swinging from the rafters, Charles de Gaulle's heroic stride, and the resilience that this cathedral herself displayed in all her brokenness. Until our ravaged lady rises from the ashes, we will have to do as she does, to stand with dignity in our humility and helplessness, hold fast to our center, and wait." Okay, so Diane LeBow has worked for women's rights in Afghanistan, ridden a camel through locust swarms on the Libyan Sahara. I think there was a picture of you today in the Libyan
Right,
Sahara.
thank you. That's great.
Yeah. And searched for Amazon women's descendants among Mongolian horsewomen. Her award-winning work has appeared in many anthologies and other publications, receiving 13 Solus Awards and a Lifetime Achievement Award from Douglas College, Rutgers University. She earned one of the first PhDs in women's studies through University of California, Santa Cruz. Her travel memoir, here's the full title, Dancing on the Wine Dark Sea, Memoir of a Trailblazing Woman's Travels, Adventures, and Romance, will be published in summer of 2021. Her website is dianelebow.com, and I'm so happy to introduce Diane.
Thank you. I hope, can everybody hear me okay? Great. I'm so happy to be here. Thank you. I'm honored to join this illustrious group of women. So, my story is called A Bedtime Story, Hot Times on an Italian Train. Nothing was moving. Everyone seemed stunned. The Berlin Wall had recently come down, and Eastern Europe was like a sea between two tides. It was July 4th, 2000, in the midst of World Cup frenzy. Earlier that day, I'd left Prague on a train bound for Rome, and then to see friends who lived south of Pompeii. It had taken 2 days of waiting in long lines to get a plane or train ticket out of Prague. Now that I was finally on my way, weariness seeped into me, the kind that comes from being on a road, a rather bumpy one, for quite a while. I was returning to Italy, Bella Italia. I sighed and relaxed. No more warm milk over boiled potatoes and cabbage. My head was spinning with accounts from party members who feared they would lose their jobs, and so many who longed for some abstract of freedom. My notebook held all their tales, and I looked forward to sorting them out into stories. After the asceticism of Eastern Europe, soon I would be pampered with Italian food, joviality, and gentle landscapes. Comforts awaited me. The only other person in my train compartment, a burly fellow in a pale blue cotton shirt, pulled off his well worn cap, exposing thinning light brown hair, and pumped my hand up and down. His vigor was a healthy contrast to our stuffy quarters. "Andre, mi piacere," he said. "I'm heading down to the soccer matches. I am coach for the Czechoslovakian team." "Yeah, what a hot night." We agreed, and we each settled into our bunks on opposite sides of the otherwise unoccupied space in the train compartment. With each passing moment, the unventilated car became ever more sizzling. I dozed fitfully, and at 4 a.m., I finally realized a radiator adjacent to my couchette was on, blasting just beside my right ear. Sweat poured off my body, and I had a terrible headache. I decided to go against a major commandment when traveling the Italian rails. Thou shalt keep your door locked, particularly while asleep. I'm such a light sleeper, I thought. If I just slide the door open a bit, I'll get some air. With my purse under my head and my arm resting on my suitcase, I'll be fine. Andre was snoring softly as I quietly unlocked and opened our compartment door, then slipped back onto my bunk. The next thing I knew, I was having one of those dreams in which you try to move but are paralyzed. I managed to raise my heavy eyelids ever so slightly. A nightmarish mirage stunned me. An angular man backed out of our space, past the sleeping soccer coach, smirking while at the same time nodding reassuringly at me. His glance and raised hand warned, "Don't get up, don't move, just lie there." The man's reddish hued, elongated face and lean body had the cast of the devil. Disheveled hair, the color of watery blood, stood up on both sides of his sweaty skull like two horns. I strained to raise my arms, to move my legs. Nothing. Though I was only partially conscious, some reflexive part of my brain told me I had to force myself to grab for my purse. Weakly, I moved my right hand behind my head. My purse was gone. Just a few minutes earlier, my black leather traveling purse had cushioned my head and neck, secured securely nested inside the purse. In addition to my wallet, money, credit cards, address book, favorite jewelry, and return ticket to the States was my notebook from the last 4 weeks of travel. Stretching my arm and hand back behind my head, I probed again, harder and deeper. Everything had vanished. Like the Cheshire cat, the vermilion northern Italian had evaporated along with all my valuables, leaving behind, sizzled into my memory, only his malevolent smirk. The turidity of the night oozed into every part of my body. Something really terrible has just happened to me, I murmured to myself. I shook my head, trying to clear my brain. Drugged? Had I been drugged? How? On trembling knees, balancing myself against the compartment walls as the train jolted along, I tottered out into the train aisle and shouted, "Help, I've been robbed." "So have we," replied Australian voices. Several young men in jeans were stumbling around in the train aisle. "Someone's got everything, our musical instruments, all our money's gone. We were to give a concert in Firenze, Florence. Our musical instruments, all our money's gone. We want, we're earning our way by playing as we go." As we commiserated, we realized we were the victims of a classic Italian train experience, one I'd been warned about. During brief stops at stations, professional thieves board the train and shoot an aerosol chloroform preparation into the compartments, which temporarily paralyzes the occupants. The thieves then grab valuables and jump off the train as it leaves the station. Too late for the stunned victims to do anything except wail and get off at the next stop to report their losses to indifferent authorities who hear the same stories every day. The conductor, who was slinking about, smirked at me. "You have insurance, no? All Americans have insurance. You'll be okay." It dawned on me that he was probably involved in the theft. "Who do you think put the heat on the train in such a beastly hot night?" I said to the Australians. "You must take me to the police station," I told the conductor, who was looking sheepish. I tried to make my 5'2" as tall and my voice as assertive as possible. I was afraid that if the conductor didn't accompany me to the police office in the cavernous Rome train station, I'd lose my way and miss my connection to southern Italy. If that happened, I had no money to buy an additional ticket. Also, I was still floating in the ether of illusion that often helps us puny humans through crummy experiences. Somehow I thought reporting the theft might magically cause my personal belongings, especially my notebook, to be returned to me. Inside the humid, rancid smelling police office, about 100 angry people pushed and shouted, trying to get the attention of a bald, sweating man with a badge. The officer looked at my papers and up at me. Then he scrunched up his dripping face and started winking at me. For a moment, I was caught up in this bit of good spirits in the midst of an otherwise gloomy day, wanting to bet on the basic goodness of human nature. He will help me, I thought. Then he leered back at me. It's almost my break, he said. Come into the back room with me and I'll go over your papers. The crowd pressed against me, and I looked down to avoid tripping over someone's foot. I noticed his scuffed brown shoes were down at the heels, not the shoes of a savior at all. Worse yet, as I raised my eyes, I saw that his poorly fitting, faded gray polyester trousers had stains in inappropriate places and an obvious and unprofessional bulge at the crotch. Come into the back room with me, he urged. It was about 100 degrees in the Rome train station. I hadn't slept in 48 hours. I'd lost many of my immediate worldly possessions, and the policeman in charge of taking my report concerning my theft was urging me into the back room of the station with him. I snapped. Suddenly, I was waving my arms and shouting Italian slang I hadn't even been aware I knew. Diavolo, va all'inferno. It may or may not have been grammatically correct or made any sense. He stamped my forms. Finally, my train pulled out of the Rome station. Once again, I was moving south. This time it was in daylight. The compartment was breezy but warm. I was feeling numb from shock, lack of sleep, and the heat. Across from me sat an Italian man around 30, handsome, mustachioed, and watching me intently. Speaking Italian, he introduced himself. I have to travel a lot for my work. We live in Battipaglia. He slid the door shut and closed the curtains to the aisle. I've been married just 1 month. It's difficult being away from my wife so much. I knew he wasn't thinking about thieves. After a few minutes, he began blowing me little kisses. Amore, amore, he chanted like a mantra. A few years before, while eating cozze con orecchietti, followed by glasses of grappa at a friend's house in Rome, my Italian women friends had revealed a secret to me. Many Italian men, they said, feel responsible for maintaining the international Italian image of macho virility by attempting to seduce every foreign woman they can. But you know what? Most of them really aren't interested, and many of them aren't such good lovers anyway. They just feel obligated to pretend to seduce. They are counting on you to turn them down. I looked at the young man across the compartment from me. No, no, I said firmly and opened my book. I was on the 5th day of Boccaccio's Decameron. In this section, all the tales were about lovers who achieved happiness after grief or misfortune. A good omen, it seemed. Outside the window, green fields, ancient apartment houses with red shutters, and old women walking with their donkeys flew by. It's Italy, I thought. I'm still alive, and soon I'll be with my friends, I grinned. In the end, we're all just making our way along as best we can. My fellow traveler had quietly reopened the curtains and door to the aisle. Like a reprimanded schoolchild, he slid away from me as far as he could on the bench, knees tightly pressed together, and stared into space. Then, glancing at me from the corner of his lovely dark eyes, he noticed my book. Ecco, Boccaccio, I like very much. Would you like I read you a poco? Eagerly he took my bilingual text and read. The sonorous tones of medieval Italian soothed me as we sailed south into the heart of Italy. Drowsily, I heard him read. In these tales will be seen the gay and sad adventures of lovers and other happenings both of ancient and modern times. I closed my eyes and fell into a deep, delicious sleep. Thank you. Oh, And now, Tania Romanov Amochaev is a traveler, photographer, and writer. Tania's work has been published in Best Travel Writing, as well as Best Women's Travel Writing. She is the author of 3 books, Mother Tongue, a saga of 3 generations of Balkan women, 100 Years of Exile, and Never a Stranger, a collection of her travel writing. Since her last trip at the end of 2019 to Cuba, she has traveled exclusively within walking distance of her home. In November, she did a 7-day pilgrimage in San Francisco in search of herself and is waiting for the final audits on the book she wrote about that experience. She's open for title suggestions. Tania is a winner in the photography and writing contests at the Travel Writers and Photographers Conference at Book Passage in Corte Madera. She cannot wait for global travel to restart. Tania.
Thank you, Diane. That was a great story.
Thank you.
You had me the whole way. And thank you all for having me. So the story I'm reading is called Not a Stranger, a Fortuitous Accident and a Forever Altered Notion of Family. In the year 2000, my husband Harold and I trekked for 23 days in the mountains of Bhutan. A week into the trip, at the top of a 16,000-foot pass, I slipped and fell. I could not get back up. My mind kept moving between pain and fear. The alternatives seemed slim. The yaks were out of the question. I had seen their antics, the herders trying desperately to get them under control. And our single remaining pony was long gone. Our young guide, Tandine, squatted beside me. Tall and large-boned, his features were chiseled onto a long, narrow face, and he looked as if he could stride a Mongolian plain with an eagle on his right fist. His rugged face turned comforting. "I will carry you, Tania." He spoke quietly, with a confidence I didn't expect in someone so young. Tandine lifted me onto his back. Then he started down the mountain, every footplant landing firmly, as if we were in Central Park and not on the side of Jomolari. I clung to him like a goat, like a giant breathing backpack. At first, each step was jarring, but either the Advil or exhaustion soon mellowed me out. For the next 4 hours, Tandine entertained me with stories about his childhood. I don't remember the scenery or much else, but I remember that he played basketball with the crown prince, now king of Bhutan, that he participated in the archery contests that until that moment had seemed almost apocryphal. I learned about Tandine's family, about his grandfather, the patriarch of his clan and a devout Buddhist. In Bhutan, I learned it's the husband who moves in with his wife's family, rather than the other way around, as in China and India. Grandfather had 6 daughters, and he had to provide housing for all their families. That evening, my ankle had swelled far beyond the size of my boots. Our medicine kit consisted of Advil and arnica gel, and I had never heard of the latter. But I was determined to continue. There was an important reason for my desperate determination. 5 years earlier, Harold had started fighting an aggressive cancer. He was given a 2 or 3 year life expectancy. I quit my job and we started on all the adventures we never had time for while working and raising children. Harold was doing well at the moment, but the periodic treatment sapped his energy. It was no small miracle that he could still engage in rigorous hiking. I was as determined to continue for him as for myself, because we never knew how much longer he would be walking. I breathed deeply, looked Harold in the eyes and said, "I can do this." "Baby," Harold said, "are you thinking about me or yourself?" It was difficult to even understand the question. Harold and his illness and I had just merged into a single unit, something precious and unbreakable. I'll do it, sweetheart, I said, really. I always believed I had a high pain tolerance. That belief was about to be tested. I will never know how I did it, how I continued hiking on a broken ankle, but I did. My tools were a pair of Basque boots and a set of leaky hiking poles. We were above 14,000 feet most of the time, and we crossed 3 more passes that were higher than the tallest mountain in the United States. Some days we hiked more than 14 hours. Our longest day ended in a blinding snowstorm. The next morning, we woke to 2 feet of snow on the tents. Level surfaces didn't exist. We were either climbing or descending. Some of my fellow travelers came close to giving up. I persisted. Through all this, Tandine was never far from my side. One day, Harold said to me, "We should have Tandine come to school in California, maybe live with us." Incredibly, I had been thinking the same thing. But after all our years together, this happened often. At the end of the trip, we met Tandine's grandfather because we wanted his blessing. Grandfather was a man of dignity, strength, and calm. Slight of stature, he was as slim and straight as the bamboo arrows he too had shot in his youth. His wrinkles were like the bark on a tree, but his eyes sparkled and he smiled easily. His gnarled fingers never stopped moving over his prayer beads. He didn't say much, but he listened carefully. Even seated on a floor mat, Harold towered over everyone in the room. But for some reason, my husband seemed the supplicant as he explained our idea. Grandfather finally spoke, and Tandine translated. "I understand how my family might benefit from your offer. But how do you benefit from bringing my grandson to America and sending him to college?" While fighting for his life since the cancer diagnosis, Harold had developed a wisdom that could still surprise me. "I am a relatively new student of Buddhism," he said, "but I like what it teaches about releasing goodness into the universe, seeing how it circles, perhaps returning when you don't expect it." Grandfather reached out and hugged him. The events of 9/11, a year after this, prevented Tandine from coming to the United States. Instead, we sent him to Bangkok University, where he met and fell in love with Chimi, a fellow Bhutanese student. Harold wasn't well enough to attend the graduation ceremony, but he kept the announcements tucked in with family photographs. In 2011, I lost Harold to the cancer he'd battled so daringly all those years, long past any predictions. We had a memorial in his beloved redwood grove at our home in Healdsburg. While friends and family spoke about this wonderful man, my sweetheart, lover, and fellow walker through the world, Tandine lit 108 yak butter oil lamps in a small temple in Thimphu to ease Harold's passing into his next life. He wanted me to come and do the same. 3 years later, I did. One afternoon, Tandine and I visited that temple near the family home, where a monk ushered us into a small altar filled with rows of yak butter lamps. At first, it seemed an enormous task. They left me, and with soft chanting back in the background, I lit 108 lamps. But as I neared the last lamp, I slowed down. It felt as if Harold was there with me. I wished then for 108 more, or maybe never to stop. On this recent trip to Bhutan, as I walked into Tandine's married home for the first time, I met his mother-in-law and was greeted joyously by his wife, Chimi, whom I'd met at the graduation in Bangkok. As we hugged, I saw two small people hiding in the doorway. The older and braver boy pulled his sister forward. Finally, they both stood before me, a complete stranger from far away. Certain they would run to their mother, I stepped back so they wouldn't be frightened. Instead, big smiles broke out on little Palvar and Dechen's faces. I was no stranger. "Hi, Granny," they shouted, and soon they were hugging me. That's it.
Thank you
Nice.
so much, Tanya.
Beautiful. Thank you.
Oh, yeah. Thank you. So, Lavinia, your books, all of them are fascinating. Congratulations on your 6th volume. And I know that you're often asked what makes a good travel essay. My story, I read in an earlier reading and I extracted just the parts about the cathedral and sort of offered the cathedral up kind of in the time of COVID. And this time I was like, well, what should I do that again? And you said, no, read the parts about you because that's what makes it an essay. And I started thinking about, yeah, I started thinking about it and I realized that what makes it an essay is how the cathedral changed me. And so I kind of like looked through the book and I realized that every single essay is about that transformation thing. Peggy Orenstein's daughter is changed by visiting Auschwitz. Caitlin Barker Davis has a new conception of disaster tourism when she's in Indonesia. Christina Ammon outgrows nihilism in Spain. Anna Vodica has a new view of herself as an American in Bolivia. And Colette Hanahan, who's the artist whose sketches grace this book, they're just absolutely beautiful. And I think that on her website, and maybe on yours too, Lavinia, there are sped up videos of her doing the sketches. But she pinpoints the exact moment that she sort of follows, she calls it the call of the sirens in France and Ireland. We women are ferocious about our safety when we travel. So I know that after Diane's little time on the train that she tightened up she followed her commandments more carefully, right?
Right.
And Tanya found such belonging with Tandine, but I have traveled with Tanya and she does this. Like you turn around and all of a sudden she's got these people and she's belonging to this group. So I just felt like, wow, that was maybe when that started for you. But Lavinia, I wondered if you could talk a little bit about some of your most transformational and meaningful travels of your own.
Sure, I would love to. I love everything that you just said, and I am glad that suggestion sat well with you because I thought maybe you didn't like it after I said it, but it is what I think makes an essay is the personal part of it. I think so many people think of travel writing as what we in the industry kind of call service travel writing, which is writing about hotels and where I went and what I ate. And I think that the reason why a lot of people think of travel writing that way is because so many people are sort of afraid to dive into that transformational stuff when they write about travel, or they've sort of traveled and skimmed the surface. But I definitely gravitate to essays that are really deep. And I guess it's because that's the kind of travel that interests me, is the kind of travel that is meaningful. For me, you asked me to talk about this a little bit, and I started to think about the trips that have changed me. And I think it's really interesting, you know, when we say transformation, it's really like you go to a place, you come back changed. I was trying to explain the word to my son today, and he said, "Oh, it's like how I can change into Batman." And I was like, exactly, but not exactly. My first trip abroad was probably the most meaningful and transformative trip that I ever took. And that was just, you know, a 3-month trip backpacking to Europe when I was a junior, you know, the summer after my junior year of college. And I went with my best friend. And I think that the reason why it was so transformative is because of how vulnerable we had to be to the place, because it was pre-internet. It was, you know, we had a Let's Go Europe, and we had the kindness of strangers. We didn't have TripAdvisor. We didn't have email. We called home to our parents once, I think it was once every 2 weeks from a payphone, and we sent postcards. And so that vulnerability really allowed us to, I don't know, to just open ourselves up to people, because we had to trust that, you know, someone was going to help us when we got lost, or you know, so that was a really big trip for me, and it transformed me in that it turned me into a traveler. And the very next summer, so that was the summer after my junior year. And the summer after my senior year, I moved to Korea, and I planned to go for 1 year, and I stayed for 6. And to say that I came back a different person, I think is an understatement, because I really, when you give a place that much of your life, you change. And for me also, the other thing, so the first thing is vulnerability. My transformative moments come from when I've been vulnerable, but also when I've learned. And I learned so much in those 6 years. I learned the language. I studied Taekwondo, and it's where I started on my Buddhist path. I met this Polish monk named Wantang Sunim, who had been living in Korea for a long time. And he was having meditation lessons at his temple, and he invited me, and I was really excited to learn because my sister was a Buddhist, and I had always sort of felt this feeling of this sense of calm. And but the morning that I was supposed to go and meditate with him, my knee hurt. I had this cranky knee, and so I called him. I was going to say email, but we didn't have email then. So I called him and I said, "I can't come. I can't sit for that long. I have to get up and you know, leave, and you know, I can't sit." And so he said, "Oh, no worries. I'll come to you right after the class." And I was like, okay, this monk does house calls. And he did a house call, and he came over. And my apartment building was under construction at the time. And it was the loudest construction you can imagine. And he started coming over and teaching me meditation. And that's how I started on my spiritual path. So it was trips like that. I could rail off like 100 meaningful travel experiences that echo in some way experiences that you all had. You know, I lost all my possessions in Korea and in Bangkok, and then, you know, was helped by the kindness of strangers. I found family, just like Tania did with Tandine, who I saw is here. He just chimed in on the
Yeah,
chat.
we'll have to let him talk.
in Korea, I really, really found family there. And like Erin, like your place of worship, I spent 3 weeks in Tibet with the teacher who would become my root Lama, my Rinpoche, at his monastery in Tibet, and it changed my life. And so I don't know, I just really believe that when we're vulnerable to a place and we go in thinking, I have a lot to learn, what can this place and these people teach me, then it's pretty easy to have a transformative experience. And I'm not sure if that answers your question.
I think it does. It's beautiful. It just sort of, it's like we travel to a place and then we just sort of get tweaked. Sometimes it's a major change, but sometimes it's just something little like we're more trusting, or we realize that people are kind. So yes, thank you so much. I have a couple more questions for Lavinia, but I wonder if we should try to go to Tandine because he's
Pretty far
here.
away. Is there a way to do that?
Is he on camera? Like, Cheryl, you're muted.
Cheryl, you're muted.
And I'm going to get back on the screen here.
Okay.
And we will
I don't
get
know.
him in. Okay, hang on just a second. I need
Oh,
to.
how cool.
Yeah, okay. I'm gonna
Only
get
COVID and Zoom can do this.
True.
Where,
True.
okay, so where is Tandine right now?
Tandine, are you
I'm
on
going to
wave?
promote him to panelist. You're going to see him in a minute. And if he has his video and he needs to unmute, Tandine, ask to unmute. So can you unmute yourself, Tandine? Yeah.
Yes,
Okay.
can you hear
Tanya,
me?
we'll just talk to him.
Great.
Hey, can we see your video?
Yes, yes, of course.
We would love to see your face.
You have to put the screen on.
Just give me a minute. Okay, okay.
All right.
There he is.
Face.
You're scared
Hello.
to see yourself.
Good evening.
Where are you?
Thank you for
Hi.
coming.
I'm in the tent right now.
Wow. Are the kids there?
No, I'm Tania. I'm far away from Thimphu. I'm in the place called Tongsa.
Oh, he's doing work for the government, for the king.
Mhm.
Oh.
Wow.
Yeah,
Thank you for waking up.
I couldn't even clean myself up right now. I didn't even wash my face. So.
You look great on.
No, I set an alarm and I woke up to it to attend the Zoom.
That's great. That's great. And we just got a note from Barbara Lannon, who met you by visiting you in Bhutan too, and she's here. So it's
Mhm.
great. So good to see you. Oh, there we go. Now we know
I'm
where
out
you
now.
are. Oh my God, it's beautiful.
Tandine, I'm very honored. I don't think I've ever had such a long distance guest on one of
Yeah.
my bookshop Zooms. So I'm quite honored that you joined us. And I love the story that Tania wrote about you. All these stories are wonderful. And to have actually a star of one of the stories with us is great. So thank you.
Do you want to tell
Like I mentioned-
America something, Tandi?
Yes.
Thank you so much, guys. Really honored to be a part of you guys right now.
Oh, Tanya read her story about the time when you lit the yak butter candles. It was just such a beautiful scene. And I wonder if you remember when you met her and she was injured.
Well, yeah, that's no. We take this as a part of our service to every, visitor who visits Bhutan. But Tanya and Harold is totally different. Right
They
from the
stood out.
beginning, they are strong. I remember that much, and just walking along with them, listening to their part of story. They have indirectly been trying to convince me to come and study in the United States. Only until later they revealed that if I am interested to, go to US and study, and I was quite, I don't know, I was quite nervous at that time, and because I don't know, everything was happening so fast, and I couldn't decide. So they said maybe we should go and talk to your grandfather. So everything happened that way.
Yeah, Tania recently lost his grandfather. He's such a special person.
I was gonna ask about him.
Yeah.
The way you describe him in your story is so beautiful, Tania.
He was a beautiful man.
Makes
Yes.
him live on, kind of.
And Tandine was a 17-year-old kid.
Yeah. So Tandine, can you tell us like where you are and what you're doing right now?
Like
where are
I'm
you?
here in the central part of Bhutan, where our king, he has initiated water projects for all those disadvantaged villages where they lack proper drinking water for quite some time. So it's been a very expensive project for the government. So until later, our king, he had a vision where he wanted to, I guess all the youths and people wanted to be trained, get an intensive course on military and have a proper group where they can volunteer on any projects, or, like if we have casualties or disasters, where the citizens can contribute to the king. So he came up with this project called Desung, the Guardian of Peace. So this happened, I think around 9 years back, where he used to send group of men and women to the military camps to get an intensive course for 1-2 months. So until later, when the pandemic hit the world, so he is trained, their soups contributed a lot to his project, and so the COVID time was a big time for this project, and then there were a lot of volunteers. He did not expect that much volunteers to come forward. So until recently, then he started instituting courses like water project, water classes. He used to get trained instructors from all kinds of institutions, and they were training people at these camps how to work on water, how to work on disaster management, and on agriculture basis. So in February, I had the opportunity to get trained also, because since everything is shut down, my business was closed for a while. I don't have anything to do, so I didn't have any work right now. So I contributed to that training, and when I just got back, there was this slot where the king wanted to document all the water projects he has installed, around the country. So I have a team. Where we can archive and document all the water projects, and give it back to the office so that they can have, and maybe they can store it up or something like that.
Right. So you're traveling. Are you traveling around just documenting all the projects?
Yes. So this is their barrack. This is their barrack where all the volunteers stay in.
Okay.
And this is where we are camped.
Wow.
Yeah, and this is my fellow volunteers. So we are all in orange dress. That signifies the king. That signifies the king's volunteer.
Oh, wow.
Interesting. Well,
So
thank you so much. Thank you for
This is
explaining
of
that.
the place where I'm in.
Wow.
Beautiful. Wow.
Someone
Yeah.
wants to know how he has cell coverage in the middle of what looks like nowhere, but that's the global world we live in today.
Did you hear that, Tandi?
Yeah.
Yes, yes. No, I have to stay close to the barrack because they have Wi-Fi there.
That's good. You know, this,
Amazing.
to me, this is
That's
one of
so.
the it's one of the most wonderful things about travel is that you establish relationships like this with people who live in a very foreign place, a long ways away. And yet there's this common humanity that we all share, and you learn
Yeah.
about their life and their experience and their stories. And, you know, they help you and you bond. And it just, I really think that travel, was Larry who said this is a path to peace. You know, it's really a way to get to know other cultures and people and realize that we're essentially all the same. And I just, this is such a wonderful example of that.
Yeah. Wow.
This is Tandi. Thank you.
Feel like I
Thank
met
you.
royalty.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah, and one more thing. Can I continue?
Yes.
Yes, please do.
Yeah. So until recently, I had the opportunity to visit US. You know, in 2017, I was there, but Tania was already on her move to India. You know,
Oh.
so she gave me a whole list of details how to have access to her apartment.
Mhm.
So I stayed there for almost a week. You know, I couldn't meet her, but our friend Barbara, she took me to California, you know, where Tania and Harold spent most of their time. You know, I had a small prayer for Harold that time. And when I had the chance to go back again in 2019, there she was, Tania. You know, we had such a wonderful time. And I never realized how much, you know, like how popular I am around her circle of friends.
And now you're more so. Now everybody knows.
Really? No, for sure.
Yay.
Oh,
So I
that's
want to thank
awesome.
Tania for everything. She has been supporting me time and again. I'm very grateful for that. You know, which brings, whenever I think of Tania and talk to her, which brings tears to my eyes all the time.
Oh.
Oh.
Okay.
Thank you, Tania.
Enough, Tandi. I love you.
Oh,
I love
thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you so much.
So much for joining us. Thank you.
Thank you. Wow.
Okay, so Cheryl, I have like one more thing to talk about Lavinia with
Yeah.
Lavinia. Is that okay?
Yes, go
Okay.
right ahead.
Lavinia, I just wanted to mention your new podcast. It's called There She Goes. It's kind of continues your mission. I don't know if you could say your mission, but it's women sharing true stories of travel. And I love your kind of tagline for it. It's no chit chat, no interviews, just adventures. And it's really great because they're little kind of bite-sized little podcasts. And I listened to the one about how it started and it made me cry. It was so sweet how you, and I'm sorry, I don't remember the other woman's name, but
She's
I
on
wonder-
there. She's here tonight. I saw
Oh,
her.
good. Oh, how exciting. I love that. Like maybe you could just tell us just for a second about how you guys managed to start this up.
Sure. Well, it was Kelly's idea. Well, it came from the time lapse videos that you mentioned before that Colette and I made, which are not on, well, some of them are on Colette's website. I should put some on my website. They're all on our Instagram and maybe on Facebook too. But what they were was we would have a short clip of under 1 minute of someone just reading from their story. And then Colette had taken time-lapse videos of herself painting the
I'll show some of them.
and so Kelly had watched one and she immediately just texted me and said, we have to share more stories of women's travel. And I was like, well, yeah, that's what I've been doing for a while. And she was, no, in their voices, in their own voices, because she had just become so enraptured with hearing the actual voices of the women telling the stories, and she wanted to hear their experience. And and not just through the best women's travel writing, but through so many wonderful anthologies and publications. And so we just started reaching out and choosing stories and doing it. And and we just launched it on Tuesday.
Yeah, I listened to the one by Natalie Bethel. It was so fantastic.
Yeah.
But yeah, you should. What's it called again?
It's
There
called
she.
There She Goes.
Yeah, there she goes. Okay, so I just wanted to say thank you to Lavinia for the care with which you edit our work, the beautiful books you bring to us, the stories that you write, and the ways in which you highlight women's stories. Thank you.
Well, you're welcome, but it's really Larry Haviger and James O'Reilly who are to thank, and they are the publishers of Traveler's Tales.
Yeah.
I did not make up this anthology. They just asked me to edit, and I tried to quit like 4 times, and they wouldn't let me. First time I was like, I have a baby, I can't do it, and they were like, no, you'll be fine. Just
They are awesome. Those
they're
guys.
amazing, and they're
they are
such champions of women's travel writing.
True.
And I bow very, very deeply to them, and I've learned so much from both of them. And it's really an honor because, and it also, I get to meet so many fascinating, intrepid, inspiring women who are travel writers like you. So thank you.
Awesome. All right. Thank you. There's the last 6 ones that you, here's the 2 before that. And I think Cheryl, I think you have these at the
We do. Yeah, we have at least the last 2 or 3. And looking forward to Diane's new book. And I have a couple questions for all of you, but I'm going to encourage anyone to raise their hand and or put a question into Q&A now as we start to wrap up. Erin, what you said about Lavinia, I could say about all of you ladies. Everything you've done is so inspirational. And my 2 questions are, why is travel an important part of our lives? How has travel for women changed so dramatically that now we're featuring all these stories by female travelers and writers? And before you answer that, I want to read something Lavinia wrote in her introduction, which I think so captures the importance of travel. She says, I believe in travel. I believe that by disorienting us, it rearranges us. Travel builds character, ignites imagination, nurtures independence and humility, catalyzes curiosity and self-examination. It can be a bulwark against stagnation and a call to action. It widens our worldview and brings us face to face with our privilege as it forces us to reassess entrenched beliefs and long-held concepts. And she goes on to say that it's a solid start toward upending our biases and assumptions because it compels us to see beyond the abstractions of a foreign land to its humanity. I think that's just the most beautiful treatise on the value of travel, and welcome all of you to add to that. I know our travel's been very curtailed recently, but it will come back. And I think that it's so important that people, not everyone can, not everyone wants to, but to the extent you have that ability to experience other cultures and worlds and to travel, I think it's a huge gift.
Well, I would kind of second, I think Lavinia just put it so perfectly. I would say that travel is meaningful to me because of 2 things. The first one is that it's just I've been proven wrong. When I started traveling, it was just like a constant learning experience because I would expect one thing and something else would happen, or I would think something was true and I would learn that no, it's not like that, it's something else. I thought it was very humbling, and that's how I learned. But the other thing for me is just the deep, deep, deep connections that you have. I mean, I just think that's so beautiful that we had Tandine here, because here is someone from across the world, and we can just have such deep connections with people whose lives are very different from ours, and we discover what we have in common.
I want to say that yes to all of this, and having an older perspective. Like when I started traveling by myself back in the 60s, not that many women were traveling alone. And I always felt like, especially going to a new country, a new city, was like diving off a high diving board. The night before I left, I wasn't sure where the pool was that I was going to reach, and was I going to splash? And just the incredible ability to find home. That's what my book is about, really. Finding home within myself and with other people, wherever I am. Like I had such close friends in Afghanistan, and I followed them now for 30 years and been over there a few times, and watched their troubles, the things that are going on. But you understand what people need or want to be happy. They don't have to be zillionaires. They don't have to have a lot of possessions. As my book ends with a line from one of my Afghan friends who's been bombed and lost his leg and so on and so forth. And he's one of the most cheerful people I know, and always telling jokes. And I said, Ashrif, how can you be so happy? And this was some years ago, 6 years ago. He said, well, we have peace now. And Diane, peace is everything. So travel really puts your perspective in a different way. It makes you focus in such a much better way. And I feel at home really wherever I am. And for me, because I've worked for women's rights all my life, to see women like you and like us and women all over the world having much more self-confidence and daredevilish and strength and courage to do whatever they want to do. It's just really very inspiring. And I never would have dreamed 30, 40 years ago that women would be as free and as strong as they are now. And I'm so happy for that, more than happy. So thank you for carrying this on. And Lavinia, you really were so fastidious in editing my work and including me. I really appreciate it.
So I wanted to comment on a completely different way of travel, which you guys triggered in some way, which is I picked up Phil Cousineau's book called The Art of Pilgrimage, which is how I got into my pilgrimage. And he started it by saying, I have been on the road all my life. And suddenly it hit me. I was on the road at 6 months old because we were kicked out of the country where I was born. By the time I was 4 years old, I was on a ship to America and a Greyhound bus to San Francisco. And then you say, how could you ever not travel when you start that way? So I couldn't wait to travel on my own. And Lavinia, my first trip to Europe sounds so much like yours, although I'm a lot older. So it was even more remote. We couldn't call. We would mail to American Express. And we couldn't afford a phone call. But it was 3 months in Europe in my junior year. So.
And it's true that your other books, Tania, 100 Years of Exile and Mother Tongue, they were such pilgrimages
Exactly.
to your past and your family. And yeah.
And someone asked Tania to tell us about your new book, your upcoming book.
Oh my God, really?
Yes, it was.
Well, that's the book that was triggered by Phil Cousineau's Art of Pilgrimage. I owe him so much. It was in the heart of COVID. I couldn't go anywhere. I even wanted to go to Oregon and it was canceled because it was the week of Thanksgiving and they said you couldn't go anywhere. And so I did 7 days of walking around San Francisco. And I mean, we're talking 18 miles a day, 12 miles a day, serious walking. And I grew up here. And what I realized was it was a weaving of San Francisco in the 50s and San Francisco today. And by the way, tech people are leaving San Francisco now and rents are down. White people were leaving San Francisco when I came, and the blacks and immigrants, me, could afford to live here. And that's how I came. So the story just kept weaving and getting better. And, you know, and then I met the most fascinating people, of course, Erin.
Of course.
It was incredible, you know, from a Catholic nun to a bus driver whose husband is on death row in San Quentin. You say, oh my God, did I really meet these people? But I did.
Oh my
I met
God.
my husband on a bus there. So
But
I said, I met my husband on a
Right.
bus in San
Your
Francisco.
bus anniversary.
not in San Quentin.
No,
I
on a
think
bus.
so.
The 71 Haight Noriega.
And now Don George is reviewing the book. So
Oh, yay.
full
Well.
circle.
Lavinia, do you have any final words on women's travel writing?
Sure. I could talk about that. I'm asked often about why women's travel writing, what makes it special, what makes it different. And it's a very hard question to answer, and I've gotten myself in trouble sometimes trying, but I've kind of come to the conclusion that we travel differently. We travel, no offense, guys, but I think we travel a little deeper. And maybe it's because we are allowed more access to our feelings, that the world allows us more access to our feelings. And maybe it's because as women, we are not perceived as threats as much as men traveling. And so we're also allowed more access into the homes and hearts of people who are locals. And we also just, I think we respond to crises, is that how you pronounce that word? We respond differently in crisis. We travel, I think, more in touch with our feelings. And so I have come to the conclusion, having now read some 4,000 essays by women travelers over the last decade of doing this. That's a ballpark figure, but it is something around 4,000. That we write with more interiority about our travels, that we tend to dive more into the interior journey. That said, some of my favorite writers are men, like Don George and Larry Habiger and Jeff Greenwald and Michael Shapiro and Phil Cousineau. And there are so many men who do write with a lot of heart and interiority. But I just think that's what makes women's travel writing special. Call me sexist, but I do. So, Erin, what do you think? You're the host.
Oh my gosh. Well, I was thinking about that quote that you have in your introduction. I think you were in Fez and you were preparing to get lost in Fez, which is what we do in Fez for sure. But the advice that someone gave you, do you know what I'm talking about?
You're supposed to get lost. You were supposed to get lost. That's throughout.
Well, to get lost, but also who to ask.
Yeah. So someone said to me, just let yourself get lost. You're supposed to get lost here. And I said, but what about when I no longer wish to be lost? And she said, oh, ask a woman for directions. Women won't steer you wrong. And and that kind of changed things for me there. I realized that I that I do that in my life too. And that's sort of what got me through the quarantine, was asking women for direction. So that's what I wrote my intro about.
What a beautiful piece of advice.
I think
It's such a great intro. Like the whole, I could listen to Lavinia riff on being lost for.
Thank you. Thank you. But I mean, not to diss on male travel writers, but the world of travel writing has been pretty male dominated for a long time, and I'm enjoying having women be my guides as I read the essays, and I like the viewpoint of how all of these amazing women travel and how they steer their way through the world.
Well, I applaud all of you and encourage you all to continue writing. Look forward to all of your new books. We do have them, as many as have been published. I think we have them all in the store, and I encourage you to come visit us. I want to do this in person next time. We'll get you down here. I don't know, you're spread all over the place, but
Maybe in August. Maybe we can do it in August.
Yes, it would be so much fun. But I'm going to encourage you to all come visit us at Sausalito Books by the Bay. We do ship for free anywhere in the US. So if there are friends you want to send these books to, it's such a journey reading through this. And I remember traveling in Europe on business when I was in my early 20s, and they put an American flag on my table at the restaurants because I was dining alone, and they wanted people to know I wasn't a prostitute, that I was an American woman traveling by myself. Wow. And I'm dating myself here a little bit, but it has changed.
That story.
It's a little bit better today, although Diane didn't have such a great experience. But anyway, I really appreciate all of you spending the time to be with us this evening. I'm going to let Erin close it off if she has anything else she'd like to say, or anything else the rest of you'd like to say. But I just want to thank you with so much gratitude and appreciation for your sharing your insights and your stories with us, and reading this evening and being with us. And bon voyage to everyone. So thank you, Erin.
Thank you.
I'm gonna let you.
Thank you. The only thing the only thing left to say is that if you have not been to this just beautiful, wonderful bookstore in Sausalito, you have to go, because talk about, I've done so many events there, and it always feels like you're on a ship and you're getting ready to launch yourself, right? Because it's right on the water. So your address, all your information is easily found. You're open now?
Yes, we are. I opened the bookstore 4 months before the global pandemic. Impeccable timing. So it's not exactly what I expected, but we are sustainable. We've stayed open. We've been delivering to doorsteps and doing curbside pickup, and now we are allowed 100% capacity. So we're selling beer and wine now. We have an outdoor parklet with umbrellas.
Wow.
I'm not going to
let
lovely. A virus get me down. And I think we have a great collection of books and other gift items. And we love supporting local authors. And of course, I am partial to women authors. And so we're right on the waterfront in downtown Sausalito. We have free parking. And so, I'm going to send everyone information about these books and all of our contact information. And you will also get a recording. You'll get a YouTube link to this video so you can watch it again. And for those who registered but weren't able to join us, they'll be able to watch it as well. So
I just want to chime in. I just see in one of the chats, it's from a friend of mine, Francoise Coz, whom I met in Afghanistan about 25 years ago. She's in France. She lives in France, and she just enjoyed our whole presentation.
Oh,
that is the cool thing about life in the time of COVID, right?
Yeah.
I think Zoom, I'm really not a huge fan of Zoom, other than the fact that we are able. I think the dynamic's so different, the gestalt's so different than being in person, but it's so amazing to be able to talk to people overseas on different continents and have them all with us and be part of this global community. So that's the good thing about it.
Yes.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you,
Thank
Erin.
you.
Thank
Tania,
you. Thank you
Diane.
so
Thank you
much.
so
Thank you,
very much.
Tandine.
This was
Thank you,
wonderful.
everyone,
Thank
for
you to
coming.
all of all the people who joined us this evening. Be well.
Bye, Tani.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Keep traveling.
Bye.